Who qualifies for an exception to the two standard citizenship tests? I'm Erick Widman. I'm an immigration lawyer. And in order to naturalize, USCIS requires that you typically pass two different tests, the civics test and the English language requirement tests. Those two tests are fairly straightforward for many of us, but they do make everyone, in fact, nervous. Even if you're a native English speaker, you have to study. Even if you are pretty good at English, you are going to have some jitters and you're going to be concerned. But for many people, there's a real barrier to naturalizing because they're not a native English speaker. They didn't learn English till they were much older, if any, and it can be very difficult to study and learn when you're over 65, and many individuals actually have a disability. So USCIS has written into the law, INA 312, actually, Immigration and Nationality Act, some exceptions for those who would need a little extra help getting through the naturalization process and having some mercy and grace shown to them by USCIS because they otherwise wouldn't be able to pass the two required tests, the two standard tests, English, reading and writing, and civics. And the civics part, the focus is on showing your understanding of both the US governmental system and US history. The English part is focused on reading a sentence and writing a sentence. So let's look at the four main exceptions to those who are required to take both tests. And in some cases, you're able just to take one of the tests, often just the civics test, and sometimes you're able to do it with an interpreter in your own language. So here are the four main categories of those who can benefit from exceptions. So if you are age 50 or above, and you've lived in the US as a permanent resident for at least 20 years, you are exempt from the English test, and you are required to take the civics test, but consulting the chart here, you can take it in your own language using an interpreter. So that's at age 50 or above. That's a threshold benefit that can flow to you, but you've had to have been a permanent resident for 20 years. Age 55 or above, and you've lived in the US as a permanent resident for at least 15 years, you are also exempt from the English language requirement. No need to show your mastery or proficiency in reading and writing. Also, the civics test is required, but you can, again, take it in your own language using an interpreter. Third main category of those who would benefit from an exception is if you're age 65 or above and you've lived in the US as a green card holder for at least 20 years. You are fully exempt from the English test. The civics test is still required, but a couple benefits will flow your way. USCIS will provide a different test that's typically a bit easier to pass, and you can take that actual civics test in your own language with an interpreter. Finally, the fourth main category that is an exception for those who can otherwise be required, if you're otherwise required to take the test, the fourth way to not have to do that test is by having a doctor show that you have a disability. And that is handled through Form N648. And depending on your condition, depending on the issue that you're dealing with, you might be exempt from the English test, you might be exempt from the civics test, or both. And I've had clients who were exempt from both because they simply were not able to have the ability to study or pass those tests. Overall, the tests can be easy for some people, but for many others, they're a real challenge that makes them nervous, but can actually be a full-on barrier to naturalizing. Thankfully, USCIS has some exceptions built in. Congress wrote those into the law. And so if you have any questions about this, definitely get in touch and take care.